If you've been paying attention, it should be no surprise to you that the reason why the franchise is doing so well can date back to the release of the first Sonic movie. Virtually by every metric that is usually measured in investor meetings can actually confirm this as well, and Sega will say themselves it all points back to the movie franchise on the big screen. So make no mistake, I'm a huge fan of the Sonic movie franchise, and this year will definitely be a celebration for Sonic, but we can't really ignore the elephant in the room because the movie franchise may potentially have a huge problem. There's a few problems, so we're gonna get into that, but please subscribe to the channel for daily Sonic videos. We talk everything Sonic on the channel. I'll give you a second. And let's get into the discussion. So here's the elephant in the room, and this is probably the first major problem. The big problem that we currently have with the Sonic movie franchise is a Jim Carrey problem. Jim Carrey arguably has the fate of the entire Sonic movie franchise in the palm of his hands. In many ways, he's probably the most important person to the entire movie franchise in general. I mean, Dr. Eggman is the main antagonist and the main villain throughout all of Sonic. He is older than every other Sonic character. The only character in Sonic that's been in the games longer... Actually, wait, there is none. He's literally been in the games just as long as Sonic has been in the games. How do you have any Sonic plot, any Sonic game, any Sonic anything without this character being portrayed? That's like Sonic not being blue, or Sonic not having red shoes, or Sonic Twitter not arguing about every single aspect of the franchise, no matter how minuscule and small it is. It just doesn't work. When they dropped the teaser trailer for Sonic Movie 3, one of the biggest headlines was that Jim Carrey was officially slated to return to his role as Dr. Eggman. Which, look, yes, it's great news that we got Jim Carrey back for the third movie, but he literally came out of retirement to do this. So this may be his final film, potentially ever. That had to have been the biggest highlight announcement of them all, was that he's coming back to reprise his role and that Eggman isn't quote-unquote dead, because that was certainly a possibility. And that was something that the people who created the film directors were saying. They're like, we want Jim Carrey back, but if he can't, then we can't replace Eggman. If you look at some of these articles, it says it right here. Sonic 3 won't recast Jim Carrey's Robotnik if he follows through with retirement ideas. So basically, if there is no Jim Carrey, most likely there won't be an Eggman. I mean, they could recast one. There's enough cosplayers out there and stuff like that to probably recreate and make a good Eggman, but it's gonna be hard to follow in Jim Carrey's footsteps as he is a legendary actor. If they don't recast him, it looks like there might not be another Eggman ever again in the Sonic movie franchise. And how do you have Sonic movies without Dr. Eggman? I mean, think about it. How many Sonic games have you played that just straight up don't feature Dr. Eggman? Other than like the storybook games, I can't really think of many. Even if he's not the main final villain, like he's still always featured in just about every single Sonic game, every single mainline Sonic game. I'm not in this man's head or anything like that. He could certainly come back and do another Sonic movie spin-off or whatever the case may be, which we'll get into later. But if Jim Carrey really is done with the Sonic movies, whoever would have to replace them, whether they're Dr. Eggman or just another final villain in general, is going to have huge shoes to fill, which I don't think they can be filled. In general, I mean, Jim Carrey aside, there is no main antagonist that can really fill the shoes of Dr. Eggman. What are we gonna do, have Zavok show up in the Sonic movies? So the first major problem for the Sonic movies is the Jim Carrey problem. How are they going to replace Dr. Eggman if they continue to move forward with the movie franchise? Now, there's certainly ways they can do it. Let's not be uncreative here. We can certainly think of ways that they can do it, and I think we're actually seeing the first couple projects without it. The first major example of what a Jim Carrey-less Sonic movie universe looks like is probably Sonic Drone Home. Now, it features Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. The CGI characters may be the most important. It follows the defeat of Dr. Eggman, but ultimately it still lives in the shadow of him because it's a Dr. Robotnik robot that you end up fighting in this. Next up is the Knuckles TV show. There's a Dr. Robotnik protege or something like that who has a similar tech to him, someone who followed in his footsteps. Again, we're just living in his shadow, but this is going to be another future antagonist or villain or whatever you want to call it for the Knuckles TV show. So we're going to see these two projects and we're going to see how this plays out, and this will probably give us an indication of what the post Jim Carrey Sonic movie universe could look like. So all day we could talk about how important Jim Carrey as well as Dr. Eggman is to the Sonic franchise in general. But we also have to ask the question, which leads us into our next problem, is we have 3 movies. What happens after the third Sonic movie? Where does the franchise go from here? And that's where it gets pretty tricky. What could they possibly introduce next into the Sonic franchise? Now, there's certain things that they can do. Obviously, at the end of movie 3, I think and I predict there's going to be some type of cliffhanger or maybe post-credit scene. They're going to do something to probably tease the audience and tease the fans, because are you just going to end the Sonic movie franchise after the third movie? It's been said that the Sonic movies are trying to become part of like a Sonic cinematic universe, so naturally that would mean that more projects should be on the way. Sonic 2 did $405 million in the box office, which at the time was one of the highest grossing video game films ever. number. That is until the Mario movie came around and did $1.36 billion, which is honestly insane if you think about it. So there's no way, in my opinion, I think they would turn their back on the Sonic movie franchise. I don't think they're going to drop 3 and then just finish it. So now that's where the problem lies. It's like, where do we go from here? Especially if Jim Carrey might not return. Again, back to that original point, who would replace Dr. Eggman as the main antagonist? Could they go an entire movie without having some type of Eggman influence or something like that in it? Are they going to do, what are they going to do? Sonic movie 4, Sonic movie 5, 6, Sonic Unleashed the movie? So it's going to be kind of tricky. I mean, how many franchises create like multiple movies after the trilogy? I know like the Star Wars movies did it, and sure, it could be done, but I think they're going to probably go a different route. And there's a couple franchises that Paramount owns that we can look to emulate. But first, let's talk about some of the other immediate options that they have available. After the third movies, it is certainly possible that they might not continue the trilogy, or they're going to go into a completely different new direction. One of the new directions I think they can go into is exploring multimedia by doing Paramount Plus. After the Knuckles TV show wraps up, they could eventually make a Sonic show. We are seeing rapid growth of Sonic's character, and it feels like he's kind of growing up. We're seeing the arc of Sonic like being like a young teenager to eventually maturing into a hero, which I feel like has been the central arc and plot of these movies. You'll even see him physically grow larger with each different movie. I think there's some possibility, now hear me out, I think at the end of Sonic movie 3, it's possible that maybe he could go back to his home original planet, because maybe his burden of being on Earth after whatever earth-shattering events happen at the end of Sonic movie 3 might be too much for the planet to handle, and Sonic feels like he's mature and he goes his own separate ways from his, adoptive family. That would spawn a huge, endless amount of possibilities where they could actually tap into some of the more source material, faithful kind of stuff. I feel like since humans are so central to Sonic Adventure 2, which is what the third movie is going to be based off of, obviously it's going to take place on Earth, and the humans are going to be a big focal point of that. But after the third movie, I feel like the biggest involvement with humans in the Sonic franchise might not be as important to what they could tell next, because a lot of the Sonic games after Sonic Adventure 2 don't really feature humans that much. Yeah, they're here and there in like Sonic Unleashed and stuff like that in 06. In the current day and age, we haven't seen a human in a Sonic game since I think Sonic Unleashed. Perhaps at the end of movie 3, they all go their separate ways, and then now we're open for a potential Sonic movie spin-off series or something like that that takes place in Sonic's world, and then you could start dealing with like the more anthropomorphic characters. Could that be too much for the general audience though? That's a whole separate question, because I do think that introducing a lot of extra characters might confuse people. I mean, if you remember the reviews for Sonic movie 2, people were asking why there was a red Sonic when they were talking about Knuckles. You might have to take into perspective what the general audience thinks about adding characters like Amy and Rouge and all them. So like I said, there's a lot of issues with like what happens after the third movie. They clearly set up the first 3 movies perfectly in the universe. The question is, what are they going to do after? And like I said, they could do like a Paramount Plus spin-off. You could follow the events of what happens to Shadow after movie 3, assuming that he like kind of dies or something like that. We could do a Tails spin-off. Again, we could do just a straight up like Sonic show. You know what I mean? Like we did Sonic Prime already. There's no current Sonic shows lined up, so I feel like the one that makes the most sense would be something maybe set in the movie universe to help further promote the IP, because it's just way too successful for them to just give up on it. But it seems like it's kind of all or nothing with movie 3, and then we're gonna have to do somewhat of a reset or something like that. Like, yeah, they could introduce Metal Sonic. Yeah, they could do Chaos. They could do Sonic Adventure. It's not a problem for me to decide. That's what I'll tell you. That's for Paramount to figure out. When I think about the future of movie Sonic and the Sonic Cinematic Universe, I think of TMNT, because that's also a franchise that Paramount owns. Now, keep in mind, this is outright owned by Nickelodeon, whereas Paramount, I know they own the rights to the movie and probably the movie character. But since it's Sega's IP, I think there's a little bit more of a complication when it comes to that. But I think in general, like the movie universe, I think that like runs through Paramount. Like anything that has to do with this Sonic portrayal, I think Paramount's the one that like kind of calls the shots. But back to TMNT, again, this is a franchise that Paramount owns, and maybe this could be a blueprint for what Paramount could do with the Sonic movies, assuming that Sega continues to work with them following a third Sonic movie. Since Paramount acquired the rights to the TMNT franchise back in 2009, they produced 3 different movies. They did a Nickelodeon television show. They also did a television film as well. So they did like 5 or 6 different projects and shows. So they kept the franchise very busy, but they also did it across several different mediums. They did a 2D animated show. They did a live action movie. They did a 3D animated movie as well. So there's so many different variations of TMNT that they did. So assuming that they did that for TMNT, and it's possible they can do it for Sonic, I would hold an outside chance that maybe they could do a Sonic show. It could even come to Nickelodeon, which would be pretty crazy. Again, Sonic Drone Home, definitely a perfect example of what like a Nickelodeon Saturday morning cartoon for Sonic could look like based off of the movie universe. I think doing something like that, like maybe bringing the movie Sonic universe to Nickelodeon, I think that could be like a pretty crazy move. So there are certainly avenues that Paramount could explore to keep the movie franchise alive and well, assuming that they go past the third movie. They have Paramount Plus as an option, which they're already doing. So if the Knuckles show performs well, that would be a great indicator for Paramount to continue investing into the Sonic movie franchise. So I think Paramount Plus might be the best option because that's more in line with what the movie franchise is all about. But again, they could do a Nickelodeon show, they could do animated, they could do a lot of different things. Or maybe Sega could just go in a different direction, and maybe for future Sonic movies, they do something completely different in a different universe. So like I said, there's a lot of question marks for the Sonic movie franchise that are going to need to be addressed following this third movie. So I'm not concerned. Like, listen, I'm so excited for Sonic movie 3. I think the Sonic movies are great. Like, really, I think that they do a really good job, and I truly enjoy them. So I want to see this franchise continue to thrive and succeed, but they have a lot of difficult questions they're going to want to answer, and I'm sure that they're internally going through these questions right now, especially while the third movie is in development. So let me know what you guys want. What is your prediction for what happens after Sonic movie 3? Do they do Sonic movie 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? Do they do a Paramount Plus show, Nickelodeon show, or is this it? Is it over? If you want to learn about times when Sonic was featured in non-Sonic games, also make sure to watch the video on the end screen. It's really good. I got nothing else to say to you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.